these different activities going on to celebrate Black History Month. And remember, as being African American, we celebrate it every day. However, we've been given this short month to celebrate it here nationally, and we're doing taking advantage of that here in the Daytona Beach area. Now, today I have two very, very, very important guests in the studio. One, Robert Whiting. He's a Nile Valley historian, also a musician. We'll talk to him. And also have the Dr. Primrose Cameron, rolls me a taco. And we'll talk about that later, too. And that's been how many years now? About 24 years now, and I've yet to get a taco, but that's okay. It's okay. Okay. It's okay. And it's probably still anyway. Is the store still open there in Pearson? The store is closed. So we have to go to the big metropolitan area of DeLand now to get one. Okay, good. All right, let's go now. Mr. Whiting, it's a pleasure to have you here in the studio with us today, sir. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Whiting, and we share with the audience, please.
Well, thank you, Andrew.
Yes.
First, I would like to give a shout out to the audience in the most ancient language in the world, and the first written language in the world, Hotep Ankh Uja Sepnet. And I just said, greetings, life, prosperity, and health to you. All right. So, and for my life, it's been a very transformational process from a standpoint that I was in undergrad, and I was at home one afternoon, and I heard this gentleman talking on the radio about a lecture that he was going to give that Saturday. And he said a couple of things that I had never heard before. First, that Africans were the first humans on the planet, and that they had developed the greatest and longest lasting civilization known to man. That sparked my interest, so I went to hear him. And that particular lecture has led me on a journey over the last 40 or more years to do research and study about ancient Africa and our contributions to the world.
Mr. White, let me ask you a question here. The Garden of Eden was the original location in Africa, in the continent of Africa?
Let me put it this way.
Okay.
Since we know it's a fact that's been proven by DNA analysis, by all of the artifacts and the skeletal remains that have been found in Africa, that the first modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, originated in Africa around 200 to 300 years ago, because it just last year found some skeletal remains in Morocco that go back to 300,000 years. So the first humans were in Africa, and in fact they were on the planet by themselves for the first about 160,000 years before they started leaving Africa and going to other locations.
So logically, you would think that God created man, and since the first human is located in the continent of Africa, in all probability, the Garden of Eden is located in the continent of Africa.
It would have to be.
It would have to be.
Yes.
It's based on fact.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Doc, I'm sorry, I keep calling you doctor because I know you have that infinite knowledge, so the doctor keeps popping my head. But Mr. Whiting, who were some of your influences when you actually get started into studying the Black history?
Oh, many. I was fortunate to live in Washington, D.C., and all of the great scholars would come through there because we had a large African-centered community. But Dr. Ben, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Van Sertima, Dr. Obenga, Dr. Charles Finch, who by training is a medical doctor, but he took an interest, like many of us, in ancient Africa and started doing research, and he's written a number of books. He's an international scholar. I went to Kemet, which is what Africans called their country. The Greeks renamed it Egypt. I use the African names because when you change the name or rename it, you lose the original meaning and the content of what was intended. But I did a study tour with Dr. Charles Finch for 2 weeks in Egypt, and it was another transformation in my life, to really look at the temples, to look at the writings, to be able to look at the greatness of ancient black people, thousands and thousands of years before any other group were civilized to the point where they could write and build structures such as the one that were built in Kemet.
Mr. White, you hit some of my nerve veins here. I read a little bit. I would go off on a tangent here. I read this book about the Africans actually coming to America. How the artifacts they found, the broad noses, the
Yes.
African features, even in South America, even in Mexico. And what had happened in some cases actually chiseled down the nose to represent European ancestors rather than African. But in all probability, we were here, and not probability, we were here before the Columbus, so to say, discovered the New World, because all the artifacts that were found and things, even just the current itself, they come off the coast of Africa, it actually comes this way, so we were here first. And this misnomer that we're teaching kids now in school is that someone else discovered America, but that's really not the case.
Well, you're absolutely right, Andrew. In fact, Dr. Van Sertima, I spent a lot of time with him. He would come to D.C. On a regular basis, and he proved conclusively that Africans were here around 2,300 years before Columbus. In fact, Columbus, in his diary, when he landed at the island of Hispaniola, basically the natives there gave him spearheads and said that they were trading. They had got no spearheads from tall black men who would come by on boats periodically. He sent the spearheads to Spain to be essayed because he didn't believe it. The results came back from Spain that yes, those were African spearheads. So Columbus, in his diary, confirmed the fact that Africans had been coming to America hundreds of years before Columbus arrived.
Mr. White, you're stirring up all kind of emotions in me about things that we've been not acknowledged for, even to our present times in the 20th century and whatnot. But I'll go off. That'll be another show, Mr. White. Another show. Well, yeah, I think your answer to the question, how long have you studied and done research in ancient Africa? Have you had the opportunity to actually go and be on ground there in Africa? And
yes, I spent, as I said earlier, 2 weeks on a study tour with Dr. Charles Finch.
Okay, were you archaeologically digging or just went?
No, we went to look at the temples. Now, a comrade of mine from Washington, D.C., Dr. Tony Browder, he has a restoration project that's ongoing now, and he's been digging, and the first African American to do so, by the way, in Kemet for the last 4 or 5 years. Yes, so as our people wake up, see, one of the challenges that we have as a people is to understand who we are and what we've done in the past. Because as Dr. John Henry Clark said, all history is a current event. What happened 5,000 years ago, 500 years ago, or 5 minutes ago has a bearing on what happens 5 minutes from now, 500 years from now, 5,000 years from now. All history is a current event. So what happens when we don't understand our history, we don't know where we are on the clock of time at the present time. So it's very difficult, no matter how intelligent we are or how many degrees we have, to assess the current situation because we don't understand what has happened in the past. So it's a challenge for all of us.
And what happened in the past makes us who we are today in a whole lot of ways, though. The continent of Africa, there were a number of tribes that existed within the Africa itself. I know there's Ashantis, there were others there too, and the Watusis and things like that too. Now, one thing you need to realize too, that the unity was not necessarily there. There was conflict among and between the tribes of Africa. Is that correct?
Well, I don't like to use the word tribe. I like to use ethnic groups.
Okay, I agree with that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Because when we talk about Europe, we don't basically say tribe. We say ethnic groups.
Okay.
Okay. So I think Africa should be given the same respect. Okay. But let's go back before there were these ethnic groups. We have to look at what happened when man first emerged down there in the southern part of Africa. They followed the Nile, and for thousands and thousands of years, and they began to, because it doesn't rain that much, especially in Kemet. It only rains maybe 4 or 5 inches a year. They had clear skies at night and during the day. So it's obvious that you had humans who basically were interested in, well, why does the sun just last longer for a certain time of year than the days get shorter other times of the year? So they started tracking that, and they began to observe these patterns. These patterns, the great year was the 25,890 year cycle of the precession of the equinox. Okay, so we know that Africans had been tracking the stars in the heavens for at least 50-some thousand years.
Listen to the intellect here, the intelligence. Go ahead.
Okay,
Go ahead.
in order to figure out the solar year,
Mhm.
which, by the way, is an African invention in
Mhm.
terms of observing the cosmos. And it's really interesting too that this solar year is, we see it quite often when we play a game that all of us are familiar with, and that's the game of cards. It's built into a deck of cards, the African solar year. But as some of the scholars have always said, that the best way to keep a secret is to put it in front of you.
Mhm.
Okay, so for example, you have 12 face cards.
Yes.
You have 12 months in a year.
True.
Okay, you have 52 cards in the deck.
Yes.
You have 52 weeks.
Yes.
Okay,
Wow.
all right, you have 13 cards in a suit. Okay, you have 13 weeks between each season. You also have 13 lunations. Okay, you have 24 even cards in a deck. All right, so you have 24 hours in a day. All right.
I'm gonna have to go young school. I know Primrose understands this. I say, Primrose, you took me to school. And let me encourage our listeners too to go get your grandkids, go get your children maybe at home, and also the older adults. This is vital, important information about our heritage, where we came from, where we evolved from, and where we headed to. So please go get ones. Call your neighbors, have them listen to this. This is a very important segment of our radio show we're having today with obviously a very talented and very knowledgeable guest here, Mr. Robert Whiting. Mr. White, let me go at this ethnic thing. I mean the different, I call tribes in Africa.
Right.
In Egypt.
Yes.
Egypt was so in some cases, some people don't consider Egypt being part of Africa because of the advanced technology and things they had there in Egypt. But nevertheless, it is in Africa.
It is definitely in Africa. In
Yeah.
fact, at one point before World War II,
Yes.
Israel and Palestine were considered part of Africa. They were part of Northeast Africa.
Mhm.
They were taken out of Africa after World War II.
Mhm.
Okay, because you have to remember that when you look at Kemet, there's no barrier there. It would just be the same as walking across the street
Mhm.
until the Suez Canal was built.
Mhm.
And so that was the barrier that was constructed in order for ships to be able to not go around Africa to get to the Far East.
But again, Egypt is a part of Africa. Now, the decline of Egypt was basically based on what, Mr. Whiting?
Okay. Well, we have to first look at the beginning of the civilization when Narmer united the two lands.
Mhm.
And so Narmer was the African. He was the first man to rule the empire once he united Upper and Lower Kemet.
Mhm.
And since the Africans came from the south,
Mhm.
the south was considered upper.
Really?
Yes, and the north was lower. So when you think about Kemet, when they say Upper Kemet, you're talking about the southern part of the country.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr.
All right. So now, once he united, that was the beginning of the first dynasty. All right, and that dynasty lasted for over 500 years of prosperity. Okay, intellectual development, the pyramid text, which were basically the first spiritual writings in the world, are there right now on the walls at the Saqqara complex, and anyone can jump on a plane and fly to Kemet, and they can see that for themselves. Okay, but as most civilizations, when you get men involved and they start having power, oftentimes they get off track. And that's what happens with Africa. After 500 years of a great civilization, it went into what we call the intermediary period, which was about a 200-year decline where there was turmoil. Okay, it took almost 200 years to write that civilization back so that we could have the second great period, which is we call the Middle Kingdom. But it goes to show you, even for people who were dealing with the principles of my art, which are truth, justice, order, righteousness, reciprocity, harmony, that they can get off track, because that's the nature of man.
Now, after Egypt, the so-called development in the continent of Africa, and we have Sierra Leone, have the grasslands
Yes.
like this people talk about, and then we got civilized, I guess, coming in. Idi Amin came into, and all those kind of things like this too. That was more recently, but back then, when they first came and got us, that they talked about their port of Sierra Leone, we were actually transported out. Now, did our people? This is a question here now. There were actually our people who actually corralled us up and brought us,
Okay.
got us for good. I don't want to get to that.
Okay, yeah. See, that's another myth that,
that's-
that has been
that's-
used against us.
Okay.
First, let's start with the Arabs were the first group to come in and to enslave us. So,
Okay.
so let's get that out.
On our own continent.
Yeah, on our own continent.
right.
All right, and so that's why when the Portuguese started running the slave trade, and by the way, there are stories that Columbus was on some of those ships. That's how he learned about that there was a land in the east. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. So, but what happened once they started coming down the coast of Africa, and we have to remember that Europeans were the first group in the world to have the first weapon of mass destruction, and that was a gun. So
We had the ships though.
right.
Go
well,
ahead.
Right. So they came in, and and again, one of the faults of African people, and I can't say it's a fault, it's just part of our spirituality. We welcome the stranger. So when the Europeans started coming down the coast, we welcomed them. Okay, we fed them, we brought them into our homes. Okay, and then at some point conflicts broke out, and then they started enslaving us. And because they had the gun, there was no way we could compete. They disrupted the way of life. They disrupted the family structure. So, like any group, when they're being oppressed, you're always going to find people who are going to side with the oppressor. You found during Hitler's regime, you found European Jews who basically were working with Hitler, because some people would do anything to survive if they're being oppressed. So the fact that some of the Africans helped to capture other Africans is nothing new. Any oppressed group will do that. There will be individuals who will side with the oppressor. So that's nothing new. So, but the way the narrative is told is as if only Africans did that. But any
No.
oppressed group will do that.
Right. Okay. So that's very clear though, Doc. 'Cause
Okay.
The assumption is that we had I hate using modern terminology to refer to our brothers back then. But now they actually went and gathered other people involved there and were compensated for bringing them, getting the ship and taking them to the New World, and they were stuffed in ships like sardines, and the story goes on from there. But the point you brought up though, Doc, that any oppressed group, that there would be any oppressed group. Now I think that's a very valid and important message for people to hear that too. Any oppressed group.
And Andrew, we can see it today in some of our neighborhoods where when black men, especially the intelligent ones,
Here we go.
they're reared and they have no way to survive except to do drugs,
Yes.
push
Go ahead.
drugs. So some of these young men are not bad people.
Yes.
They're trying to survive.
I understand.
And men will do whatever it takes to survive based on their environment. Okay, so we're seeing that play out in our lives daily here in America.
Doc, I forgot. I got involved. Listen, you like to join our conversation, please do so. There are two numbers you can call in. They're 386-516-8030, 386-516-8031. And we're here with Mr. Robert Whiting, who's the Nile Valley historian. A lot of important information about our heritage, where we came from, and actually some of the same characteristics existed then exist now, the doc referring to, about oppressed people. It's a very, very important show here. And again, call your neighbors, call your friends, bring your kids, grandkids in. This information you need to know. At one time, we didn't have written word. Or the past information we set around the word of mouth. And that's the way we got it. Told stories around campfires. This is how we pass on information. It wasn't necessarily in writing. And it still goes on today. Very important information here, too. Yes. And then again, okay, Mr. Whiting's going to be again at the Ormond Beach Library February the 10th, 2019 from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Nile Valley historian and let the ancestors speak. Again, it's at the Ormond Beach Library in celebration of Black History Month. Ormond Beach Library, 30 South Beach Street, Ormond Beach, Florida. And again, Mr. White is going to be there February the 10th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. A very interesting topic. You know, we need to know more about where we came from. A lot of information to talk about now is not in the secondary textbook you have in your high schools, elementary schools. Is not there. So it's our duty and our task to inform our kids and educate our kids about where we came from and who we are. And this is very important. So please, make it a point to get out and come out on February the 10th, to Orange Beach Library to hear Mr. Robert Whiting. Mr. Whiting, I'm going to ask you a few more questions and go to our second guest here, Ms. Taco. Why is knowledge? I think we already talked about that. Ancient African history taught in schools and colleges is not really. I alluded to that too. Is it taught? I mean, there were African American courses we took, but I don't think they were in depth so far as your knowledge base is concerned. Would you agree with that, Primrose, or no?
It's not part of the curriculum.
It's not part of the curriculum, and in some colleges, it's an elective. It's not required.
Most colleges.
Yeah.
It is not, but we've been very fortunate in Flagler County because of the African American Cultural Society.
Yes,
We were able to employ them to add an African American or an African Studies program. And in fact, Bert Green, who is on the Education Committee, by the way, I'm chairman of the Education Committee for the African American Cultural Society. And we worked with the Flagler school system for over 7 years under the leadership of Lionel Holder, who had been an assistant principal in that school system. So we were able to go into the classes and basically teach the type of things that I'm talking to you about, which is very, very unusual. So for 7 years, the children who took the African American history course were exposed to some of the information that we are discussing today. And that's we're very proud of that at the African American Cultural Society. By the way, I would implore any of the listening audience, if you are in Palm Coast, to please stop by the African American Cultural Society. It's a beautiful building. It was constructed in 2001. It's about 3,400 square feet, and it has a repository of the type of information that we're talking about in the Robert and Irma Brooks library. Everything that I'm talking about, we have books to, if someone is interested and wants to do research, they can come to the African American Cultural Society and be exposed to that information.
That's a fantastic reference source here. And Palm Coast, I think 45 minutes down the road here, down I-95 north rather. And I don't know the exit there too, but I'm sure you can call somebody at Palm Coast, or you can text me here, email me here at DaytonaChat@gmail.com. I got the information and direction how to get there. I visited the facility, been in there several times, different events there. It's amazing. This community actually built this building, came and built this building, African American community there. And it serves all kind of different purposes, but it's just amazing. And I think they have land there to actually expand one day, but it's a beautiful, beautiful facility. And it has one purpose in mind, is to enhance African American beliefs, dreams, desires, and activities. So take the opportunity to go down the street here, 45 minutes Daytona Beach, I-95 north to Palm Coast, visit the African American Cultural Center there. I don't know why I keep calling you doctor.
But quite a few people do that.
Okay.
That's okay.
No, I keep calling you doctor. Okay. All right. Well, Mr. White, what is your vision for the ancient African history? I mean, we talked about being in the schools, but I guess we start at lower level now, so far as being in elementary, and bringing it up to junior high school, enhancing it into the curriculum, so people know more about who we are. And you know what? Teaching others about who we are too is an advantage to us too.
Important.
And we need to know too, but teaching others too, because that erase that veil of ignorance, which prejudice is based on, that ignorance. And so I think it's important that we do. I'm asking a question for you, get involved with that. But your vision, Doc.
Okay, we tried that in Washington, D.C. We tried to get it to be part of the curriculum, but every time we made efforts, it was stopped. One of the reasons that this information I don't think will be taught in the school system anytime soon is because once people understand what Africans were able to do in Africa, then it destroys the myth of white supremacy. It totally destroys it. What I envision is that we have to start in our own communities with Saturday schools, like the Asians do, like the European Jews do. They are responsible for imparting their history and their culture to their own people. It's not going to be done in the traditional school system. I've seen so many efforts that have failed, or they're derailed somewhere along the line. So it's going to be up to us to do that in our own communities. And the challenge is for us to understand that, and also be cognizant that as long as we don't understand who we are fully, starting 200 to 300,000 years ago, because you got to start there. If we don't understand that timeline, then again, no matter how many degrees we have, no matter how smart we are, we will never be able to get on track as a people because we're not singing from the same sheet of music. We have all these different religions, we have the politics, and what our history can do is it give us a foundation that no matter what our politics or our religions are, that we can rally around this history, which was the foundation for the civilization of the world. So to me, that's what has to happen, and I've seen it as a result of being in a fraternity. One of the things that all of us had to do was to learn the history of our fraternity. So I can go anywhere in the world. If I run into another Alpha brother, okay, then we have a common bond regardless of whatever else is going on. We can relate with that foundation, and that's what has to happen with African people worldwide. And until that happens, we are never going to be able to rise up to the top as we once were.
My brother in Greek, I appreciate it. Doc, Mr. Whiting, historically in the black community, everything came out of the church. You know, all the entertainers, and religions there too, but entertainers, everything came out of church. That was a common meeting place, safe meeting place in the black community.
Yes.
Is that a logical place to start with teaching African history? Since we don't have the structured school environment anymore. You know, one time we were a second grade society, and that's where I learned some of my gospel songs.
Yes.
In fourth grade, from fourth grade, I learned in the garden from my fourth grade teacher. You know, and that doesn't happen anymore.
At all.
That doesn't happen anymore at all. None of that. And so we need a place to start, a place to, so forth in our communities and our churches. Doc, as a former school teacher, I've had parents come to parent conference and the pants are down around the ankles, and we have no idea where we came from. And these are ones supposed to teach their kids?
Well, now you touched on a real challenging issue.
Yes.
Our ancestors said in the Meta Nature, the Greeks renamed it the Hieroglyphs.
Okay.
Okay, which basically takes away the meaning because Medu Neter means words of God. Okay, but they said ignorance is an evil. So a lot of us are kept ignorant because as long as we're ignorant, we are no threat to the system. Now, in response to your question about the church church would be an ideal place. I was brought up in the church myself, but this is the challenge. The church doctrine is based on African spirituality. Okay, but oftentimes we are not aware of that, and that's one of the reasons that I feel that African Americans and Africans in general have taken to Christianity like a duck takes to water, because it's basically our story, but it's been changed somewhat. Okay, and I'll just leave it at that. But it's been changed, so in order for us to be able to get this type of knowledge in the church will have to be open to different ideas that are not necessarily aligned with the doctrine, because the doctrine controls the church. And once you step outside of that doctrine, then all of a sudden you can't be in the church. So that's the challenge.
Mr. Whiting, you know you got to come back for another show here. we just scratched the surface around here. We got more in depth here. You must come back. I insist.
Okay.
And I'll talk to Mr. Larry. You have to come back. I'm amazed. I want to learn more, and I'm sure listening public like to know more too. and your knowledge base is unbelievable. You know, and
Thank you.
it's just obvious, you know, that you're a specialist in the history of Africa, and I I want to go on, but I have to get to my friend who owes me a taco.
Well,
And,
I would like to say one thing, Andrew,
Yeah.
that I give all praises to that divine intelligence
Hello.
we call God,
Yes, sir.
because God instilled in me this desire, this insatiable desire to read books that most people would never even pick up. So I give all thanks to that divine intelligence.
Amazing. Amen on that. Amen. Now, Doc, before I go over, I know your topic at the museum is going to be, at the library, however, it's going to be Let the Ancestors Speak. I think we kind of covered that more generally, but specifically, you're bringing information to the public about the ancestors actually speaking from the past up to the time now, so we hear those important words. I think it's basically what you're trying to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And that's going to be February the 20th at the Ormond Beach Library, located at 30 South Beach Street, Ormond Beach, Florida, and celebration of Black History Month. Mr. Robert Whiting, February the 10th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. A Nile Valley historian, Let the Ancestors Speak. That celebration again, Ormond Beach Library, 30 South Beach Street, in Ormond Beach, Florida. Like more information, email me here at DaytonaChat@gmail.com, or you can call the library at 386-676 4191. Okay, again, the number is 386-676-4191. More information about Celebration of Black History Month, which begins celebration again on February the 8th. Again, Mr. Robert White is going to be on February the 10th. For the 12th, another show, February the 14th, 21st, and the 28th. And I have the entire schedule like that. Please email me here at DaytonaChat@gmail.com. I'll get it to you. Or, again, call the library for more information, 386-676-4191 for a Black History Month celebration there at the Ormond Beach Library, 30 South Beach Street here in Daytona Beach, Florida. Again, Mr. White, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I'll tell you, you have to come back again. Even before you leave, come back and do another show. I got to have you back here, Doc.
Okay, Andrew. Well, thank you
I
for
appreciate
bringing me on.
Yeah, thank you.